Once again, the United States has released its annual human rights report, which covers various countries, including Russia's war crimes in Ukraine, Iran's crackdown on anti-hijab protesters, China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, and the Myanmar military's atrocities. However, amidst this broad coverage, what stands out is the blatant hypocrisy of the U.S. Despite highlighting human rights violations in other nations, the U.S. is still stuck in a time warp and sees itself as the sole superpower with a tone-deaf approach. The section on India in this year's report is almost identical to last year's, with only one new criticism of bulldozing homes. Most nations are likely to reject this report, raising the question of why it was made in the first place. This report is not just some arbitrary document. It originates from the U.S. State Department and carries the government's official seal of approval. It's a comprehensive report that covers all nations receiving American aid and all United Nations member states. According to the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 and the Trade Act of 1974, these reports are legally required to be submitted to the U.S. Congress. Essentially, American law mandates that the United States assesses the world. The accuracy of these reports, however, is subjective and depends on who you ask. Consider Saudi Arabia, a long-time U.S. ally, but one that has recently not aligned with Washington's policies. How does America get Riyadh to comply? By raising concerns about Saudi Arabia's human rights record. It's ironic that America, which has assumed the role of human rights monitor, has such flawed human rights record itself. The answers to these questions cannot be found in the report, as the U.S. chose to exclude itself. While ideally, India or other countries would release a report on human rights in the U.S., they have not done so beyond occasional condemnation. Moving on to the actions of the U.S. military over the years, the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan has once again gained attention after 20 years. These nations have suffered immense devastation, and the situation is even worse when it comes to human rights violations. The infamous incident of Guantanamo Bay comes to mind, which is an offshore torture facility operated by the U.S. and located in Cuba. It is referred to as Gitmo, and the images of abuse that surfaced shocked the world. Despite promises to shut it down, it continues to operate, and the reason it is in Cuba is that such torture is not allowed on American soil. However, it is still being carried out in Cuba, and yet it is not mentioned in the Human Rights Report featuring Cuba. We are left to wonder why. Also, recalling Abu Ghraib, a prison in Iraq where locals were subjected to torture. It was a glaring example of how America respects human rights. Shocking images of the abuse spread around the world. However, did the wrongdoers face justice? How many top officials were able to escape punishment? Why not issue an annual report on this? Furthermore, there are deep-seated issues such as racism and police brutality, gun violence, and the only country where teenagers are more likely to kill you than terrorists. School children are shot dead in American schools, and there are oppressive gender controls such as the abortion law. How is all of this not an attack on human life and dignity? Nevertheless, the U.S. is free to publish its annual human rights report. The purpose of these reports is not to address or resolve any of these issues. Rather, America is using human rights as a tool, and it is deeply disturbing. The blatant hypocrisy of the U.S. is overwhelming.